Steve Kerr, sponsored by Xfinity. The Xfinity 10G network is made for streaming live sports, which means it's the network you can rely on in the biggest moments. The Xfinity 10G network, the best way to stream live sports. And presented by Great Clips, in sports, success is about team effort. And the same is true for your hair. Great Clips, it is going to be great. Hey, Coach, what's going on tonight? How are you?
Well, I've been better. I like doing these interviews a little more after we win by 20 rather than, blow a game at the end. So,
I gotta
what it is.
I gotta tell you, that game ended last night, and just from our personal position, I thought to myself right away, I went, oh, crap, Steve doesn't want to talk to us tomorrow now.
No questions about fantasy football, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No, we don't have any of the softball questions today. It's we're going to have to get into it because we blew that one, and I didn't have my best game as a coach, and that was that's a tough loss.
Well, let's actually start there then. If you say that you didn't have your best game as a coach, what would you do differently?
Should have left Moses in the game. Moses hits 3 threes, and he's rolling, and, we decided, we kind of overthought it. We wanted to get our best defensive group on the floor, but Moses was really good defensively, and watching the tape over again, it's like that was really a terrible decision, and I should have left him out there at least for a couple more minutes, and I think I regret that one. I regret the challenge. I did feel like at the time of the challenge, if we won, the game would have been over. I think Steph makes 3 free throws. It's an 8-point game. We win. And our guys who look at it felt strongly enough about it that we might get it overturned. But it was my last timeout, and I think both of those were poor decisions, and both kept me up last night for sure.
Yeah, it kept me up in my Twitter feed as well, with a lot of fans asking those very questions. So in the moment when Moses is playing that great, and it feels like it's probably time normally to go to Klay Thompson, is that just kind of a decision that's made on rote almost more than anything, where it's just that time where you would put Klay in?
Well, Klay was already in, and so we were putting Wiggins in. We felt like we needed Wiggs on De'Aaron Fox. I mean, he's our best bet against him. And so we made the decision to get Wiggs back in the game. But I definitely should have put him in for Klay, and then, given Moses at least a couple of minutes and just, see if he could have maintained the hot hand, and then kept the option to go back to Klay for Moses, the last couple of minutes. So that was definitely a mistake, and I deserve all the heat I'm taking today, I can tell you that.
Well, and Steve, along those lines, specific to Moses Moody, which obviously, that's something that a lot of people are pointing to. We'd love your comments on the GP2 injury, but also, does that mean that we're going to see a lot more Moses Moody?
Yeah, for sure. What was interesting about last night's game is we finally had everybody healthy. In that first half, that looked like our team. It's like we got our starters playing well. The 5-man group that's been so good for the last couple of years, they come out and they look great. Then we're coming off the bench with, CP and Dario and Gary. I mean, we got, I'm watching that first half. I'm like, all right, here's our team now. And then when, we get the injuries and it's like, all right, here we go again. But the great part about last night was Moses. He was not in the first half rotation. We got a lot of people who can play, but we're trying to get our game right and tighten up the starting group, and trying to get people rhythm. And so we were only going to play 9 people, and I told Moses that before the game, but I reiterated, you got to stay ready no matter what happens. And then he shows exactly what he's made of and what his character is. he responded by coming out when he did get those minutes and just, playing his butt off. He was amazing. And there's no question now with the injuries to Gary and Chris, Moses has earned every right to play, so he'll be back out there.
We saw a report from Shams about Gary's injury and it being a torn calf muscle. What's the status of Chris Paul coming out of last night?
Well, both guys are getting MRIs today, and we'll have announcements tomorrow as to the extent of the injury for each guy.
If we can, again, without knowing how long they're going to be out, or even knowing if Chris is going to miss any time at all, would love to know how you feel, at least with Gary. How does that change things for you?
Well, it's tough because Gary is obviously he and Wiggs are our two best on-ball defenders, and we were so excited to have the whole group last night, and we got that 24-point lead in the first half, and it just felt like we were whole again. And so losing Gary, we lose that on-ball defender, and that impacts everything. When you don't guard the point of attack, that's where the offense breaks you down, and you're really vulnerable to fouls. And so, losing Gary is a big blow. But obviously, we have depth, and we've got guys who are ready to fill in. I thought Corey Joseph was great last night. Moses, obviously, fantastic. I think Brandon Podziemski will be able to get some minutes, which we've been dying to give him minutes because we like him so much. And I think the depth on this team is there for us, and I think we'll be ready to withstand these losses.
Steve Kerr here on 95.7 The Game. Just back to the challenge for a moment, because I thought that it was a clear-cut case that you should have challenged it and probably should have won it. What is Steph Curry supposed to do in that situation where he goes up and, yes, the leg comes out, but the player lands underneath him? Where have we gotten, Steve, with a three-point shooter and his ability to actually land?
Well, I think what they called was that he kicked his leg out. But if, anybody who plays basketball, you want to take a shot while racing to your right, your leg's going to kick out. Otherwise, you're going to fall over. You have to do that to keep your balance. So our guys who watch the replay, in real time, as it's happening, they thought that it was clear that Monk ran into him. But to be perfectly honest, this is probably the third or fourth challenge that we've lost where we felt it was pretty obvious that we should have won. And then, even after watching the tape the next day, we think we were right. The league tells us we were wrong. So it makes it really hard when there's just such a dispute on the actual rule and what's being called and what's not being called. So made the challenge circumstances way more difficult. We can't even agree after everyone sees the replay and no one, the league and us, we don't agree on the call. That makes it really challenging.
Steve Kerr with us here, Willard and Dibs, as he is every week on 95.7 The Game. Now, Steve, because of the holiday, last time I had the chance to talk to you, I remember asking you about the Draymond Green suspension, and you had talked about Draymond really needing to find a different way to go about his frustrations on the floor and help stay on the floor. Therefore, I wonder what your reaction is in the first game back. Boy, he pushed it right up to the limits again.
Yeah, disappointing because, Draymond, he drives a lot of our results. I've told people over the years we don't have a single championship without Draymond, and I fully believe that. Our teams have been so skilled, but Draymond is a guy who gives us the defensive force, the emotion, the edge, kind of that. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. There's just a different mentality with our team with Draymond, and he takes us over the top. So he's a very powerful figure, and he knows that. and he and I have talked about that. But he has to harness that power. And I was disappointed last night that got the tech, the reaction, the foul afterwards, because the momentum really swung in Sacramento's favor after that. So he's got to be better, and he knows that.
We're used to parades down Market Street and parades in Oakland, but last night it was a parade to the foul line for Sacramento, Steve. 31 fouls, and you mentioned fouls and turnovers in your postgame. What can you do other than continuing to beat the drum about the fact that these are things that are costing you ball games?
Yeah, I mean, all we can do is beat the drum, and I at some point you can also use the bench as as an example. I mean, a lot of coaches at every level, they say the bench is the most powerful force and tool that you have as a coach. But to be, perfectly honest, if Steph reaches 3 times, am I going to take Steph out? Like, we kind of need Steph. So what we really need is our main players, our key guys, to set a tone for the group. It's easy for me to take a young guy out because he's fouling. But we need our starters, our best players, to set a great tone. We need Wiggs to stay down on a pump fake. We need Steph to not reach. We need Klay to not reach. Those are the key guys for us. The stars are always the key guys in the NBA. They drive winning and losing. And so right now, we need our best players to set that tone in terms of not fouling. And it has to happen. If not, then we're in some trouble.
Coach, when you talk about using the bench as a motivator, and I totally get where you're coming from, this is a very Warrior thing. When people are like, oh, well, you need Draymond. You need Klay to be good. You need Wiggins to be good. So you can't just, not have him in there. But especially with the Moses Moody situation that you've already addressed, as an example, how close do you feel like the organization is to maybe looking at things through a new lens after all these years?
Meaning what?
Meaning the way you go about making decisions, with guys who've been around, have a resume, have been there a long time. That often seems like the fallback when there's a decision. You guys go with the experienced guys. I wonder if you're close to potentially doing that differently at times.
When you say decisions, you're talking about personnel decisions or playing time decisions?
Yeah, mainly playing time.
Yeah, I would say, here's how I look at it. Like, we know we won a championship a year and a half ago. The guys who are going to drive us winning a title or not, we know who they are, right? They're Steph, Draymond, Wiggs, Loon, Klay. Like, those guys, they were the ones. Gary, huge part of that championship a year and a half ago. So we know those are the guys that have to perform at a high level if we're going to compete for a title. So, I learned this. You'll like this story. I learned this when I was a player. I was having a really bad series in the finals in '96 against Seattle. I had 3 straight bad shooting nights, and I was distraught. My wife goes to a team dinner or a dinner with a lot of the family members, and she runs into Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner. And he says, "How's Steve doing?" And she said, "Oh, he's crushed. He just feels like he's hurting the team." And Jerry goes, "Well, to be honest, it doesn't really matter what Steve does. It matters what Michael and Scotty do. They're the ones who determine whether we win or lose." So my wife tells me this, and there's part of me that's like, "Oh, yes, I'm off the hook." And then there's the other part of me that's like, "Oh, I don't even matter. What the hell?"
Yeah. That's a great story.
And my point is, the guys who are going to determine our season are our main guys, our key guys, right? Are the guys who make all the money. They're the ones who determine winning and losing. I think our young guys are all developing, and they're developing at different stages. You try to help the development process. You fit them in here and there. But this season is about winning a championship. So that means for me, I am going to lean in to our starters. I'm going to lean into our key guys, and I'm going to give them all the space they need to find their rhythm, to establish, who they are. And once that happens, it'll make the roles much easier to play for the young guys. If you want to bail out on the old guys and plug the young guys in, then you're talking about an entirely different goal. And that's now you're talking about the future. You're not talking about winning a championship because those guys aren't ready to do that.
Good answer, Steve. I appreciate the story as well as a little sprinkle on top of the answer itself. One of the mainstays, Klay Thompson. Mark and I talked about it yesterday on our show. It doesn't seem like Klay is playing with the same level of joy that we're used to seeing from this team and, the Steve Kerr led teams and all that. Where's Klay been in terms of his overall countenance? It looks like he's starting to shoot it better and play better. Have you seen Klay be a little bit down in the dauber so far this year?
I thought last night was a really good night for Klay in what you're talking about. I thought I saw more joy. I saw a more relaxed version of him. You guys, you know this, but this is it's a dream job to play in the NBA. It's also a really hard job. It's so emotional. These guys are so competitive. They're so hard on themselves. You get older and things don't go as well. You get some injuries. It's not easy to just say, okay, I got to play with joy, So Klay, I'm really just, interested in him being able to relax and give himself a break and not be so hard on himself. And, I remind him all the time, like, you're still a damn good player, but you just have to relax. And it's easier said than done. That's why we have sports psychologists. It's why we all read books about this stuff, the mind-body connection. I mean, this is one of the biggest parts of being a professional athlete. How do you attain that state? And it's a challenge each and every year for every single player. And that's part of my job as coach too, is to try to help these guys get to that state. And I believe Klay will get there.
Well, while we're on that subject, definitely want to get your thoughts on the state of Andrew Wiggins as well, especially after a night like last night. It feels like some of the signs that you're looking for are there. Not every night yet, but they're starting to come around. What do you see, and what's his mental state?
I see Wiggs really coming around. He obviously was great last night. The shooting is coming back, the rhythm. He's really a rhythm player. He's not a natural-born shooter like Steph or Klay. He's really a rhythm guy. And I think, if you connect the dots from last year, he missed, the majority of the season last year, 50-plus games, I think. And so I think he just didn't have any rhythm in camp, and at the beginning of the season, you could see it. And he's worked really hard. He's in the gym every day, getting his shots up, and I think he's finding his rhythm. He's been really focused defensively on the ball, playing with energy, and I think you can see it all coming together for Wiggs, and I think he's going to be really good from here on out. I believe in him, and I've seen the work, and I know the track record. So I think Wiggs is really rounding into form.
Does the rhythm feed the effort, or does the effort feed the rhythm for Andrew? Because you look at last night, and he played with force, and this is what you've talked about, and all the fans asked the same question, Steve. Why can't he do that every night? So I guess that's the question. Why can't he play with that much force every night?
Well, psychologically, when the ball goes in, everybody feels more confident, more forceful. Every player I've ever been around. Ball goes in, there's just a different sense of freedom and connection. And when the ball's not going in, it's tough. It's tough to find it, and it translates to everything. And that's one of the reasons we play the way we do with the ball movement. I want everybody touching the ball, because touching the ball and you're getting a shot and it goes in, your defense gets better, your rebounding gets better, and it's just the way it is. And so I think unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, those things are tied together, and we just it's all going to come as the offense smooths out, the whole game comes back.
Steve Kerr with us, Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. Coach, I'm very interested to know what your experience was, what your thought process was with regard to the in-season tournament. It was in the game that you found out you needed to win by 12. To what level was that on your mind, and how did it affect your coaching?
It didn't affect my coaching at all. We talked about it before the game. I think Dario brought up an interesting scenario. I think he was sort of, joking, but he said, what are we supposed to do if we're up 2, at the end of the game? Do we let them get a layup so we can go to overtime and try to win by 12? Great point. I mean, we must be the only in-season cup in any sport where the game counts on 2 fronts, right, in the standings and in the season tournament. So it does present some weird thinking, but none of that's actually real. You're just trying to win the game. And had we been up, 10 down the stretch, you better believe we would have been, trying to bump it to 12. But obviously the game didn't go that way. We were just hanging on for dear life, and the in-season stuff was the last thing on my mind as the last couple minutes unfolded.
And as a, quote, reward to not winning in the in-season tournament, you get Portland on Wednesday, and you get a couple of Clipper games back-to-back. And I know you like to say that it's 20 games before you can really assess where your team's at, but you're 18 in, Steve, and you're 8-10. Do you feel like you guys are closer to turning a corner and going on a little bit of a run, or are you still feeling like maybe you're just holding on for, not for dear life, but still trying to grasp at what this team's going to be?
No, we're still trying to grasp it. I think, the first half last night was a glimpse of our team at its best form, in terms of being healthy and, the starters playing well, the bench coming off, really giving us a boost. I mean, that was our team, but now all of a sudden we've got a couple of injuries, and we'll see how long Chris and Gary are out. But I think we're still finding ourselves, we have to do a better job taking care of the ball, and we know that. I mean, it's not just last night's game. We've had several games this year where we've turned it. In fact, the last game we had before tonight, the Spurs game that we've won, and we go from up 15 to up 3 in the last 4 minutes because we turn it over 5 straight times. So, if we don't solve that and we don't solve the fouling issues, then we're in trouble. And simple as that. So it's hard to say right now at the 18 game mark that we know who we are. We got to resolve those things before we'll really have a feel. And it's but we've had enough games to know this is a real problem. So we got a lot of work ahead.
Another chapter in the book that's building, especially early in this season, between you guys and the Kings. What would you say has sort of grown out of that since last year, and how would you describe those matchups, especially in a game like last night at their place?
I think there's a lot of respect between the two teams. Obviously we have the connection with Mike Brown, who's one of my favorite people. And, there's a ton of respect between Steph Curry and De'Aaron Fox. And, so there's mutual respect, but, we've played probably 12 times, since the playoff round of last year. That's a lot. So it's, you sort of get tired of seeing each other, on the court, and we're very, very familiar with each other, in terms of, strategy and scheme and all that stuff. But, it's interesting. It's, what's what's the line? Familiarity breeds contempt. I think there's some of that. You know, we're probably tired of seeing each other so much.
And you got some familiarity coming up with the Clipper games in a back-to-back slate here coming up. And you mentioned the turnovers and the fouls. Steve, have we gotten to a point where there are too many free throws in the association? Is this something that you notice watching these games, that it's just an onslaught of free throws on both ends?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan, but you know, there's lots that goes into that. You know, there's some of it is the interpretation of rules, and some of it is just plain old hacking. And but you know, the rules are what they are. They don't excuse a lot of the fouls that we committed last night, and so you know, while there were some, like verticality plays at the rim, that I had, you know, exception with. Fouling's on us. You know, only we can resolve that.
You know what? It's interesting. I sort of have a perception that I wonder if you would validate. You talked earlier about the frustration of getting older, no matter what you do in life. But for these players, and the idea of not always being able to do what you did before. Is the fouling directly related to that? Is that because some of your guys don't move the way they used to?
I don't think so. We've been a high fouling team for years. You know, the difference is our margin for error now is not as great. So, you know, we have to account for that, and we've got to be smarter. Bottom line.
Coach, great stuff. Thank you for your candor today, as always. And as we said, we hope next time we talk to you, it's going to be after a tidy little 3-game win streak. We'll see you out there tomorrow night against the Clippers.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it off a 20-point win, and you guys can ask me about my fantasy football team.
Okay, yeah.
Playoff-bound fantasy football.
I mean, I had my, what did you eat for Thanksgiving question all ready to go.
Yeah.
And then I had to cut it. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, speaking of which, a belated happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah,
Steve,
to you as well, Coach. Thanks so much. All right, there he goes. Steve Kerr, right here on Willard and Dibs 95.7 The Game.